Today's workshop, guys, as part of the Young Men's Leadership Academy mentoring program, all right, it's going to be Young Men's Leadership in the Windsor Police Department. We kind of touched on some information briefly yesterday. Obviously, I wanted you guys to prep different questions that you guys may have, whether it's due to the different social issues and different things that are happening across the country, what you see, whether it's locally. But we want you to feel free. Obviously, talking to Officer Amaro here, you know, he just wants it to be like an open discussion, you know, so feel free to ask these guys anything you need. We had some funny information yesterday. I think it was my man Shakir. He had the most outrageous, I hope he doesn't ask it, but it's the most outrageous question in the world. You know, we talking about serious stuff. He's talking about can he ride his four-wheeler outside. But no, hey, if you, he said, I just got a four-wheeler, I got a question. But again, any questions you want to ask, guys, and I appreciate your professionalism during this workshop. Again, time is valuable to me. Right, Chad? Time is very valuable to me. When someone decides, like, man, you know, I want to take my time out to help someone out, we take it serious. So when these gentlemen decide to come in and say, like, man, you know what, this is important enough to us to come into Windsor High School to be able to present something to these young men, we take it serious. All right, so we need to show that same respect, which you guys all have. You know, sometimes we goof around a little bit too much, but we definitely are respectful young men. And we need to make sure with each and every time that we have an opportunity, we put it on display. All right? So I want you to make sure you guys are attentive, and we ready to start rocking and rolling. They'll introduce themselves, and then we'll start off with the questions.
Gentlemen, how's it going? So first, I put the tables here, and to me, this whole thing is about breaking barriers, right? I don't want to sit behind a table, because that's just another barrier, right? So we're going to pull the chairs up so we can be part of a group. So we can talk. You know, you guys can ask us questions. Obviously, you know, we're the police, and we have jobs to do. You know, and there are standards that the community imposes on us of what we're supposed to do, what we can't do. And you guys are part of our community. You're who we're here to protect, to serve, and to, you know, to keep in line sometimes. But we need to work together. We can't do our jobs without your support, without your family support, without community support. And we all know, you know, you talk about it, it takes a village. It takes us all to work together to really have a safe place to live, to go to school, to work, to drive, and to have fun, and to play. So with that, I'm Don Melanson. I'm the Chief of Police. I've only been in Windsor for 4 months now. I did 20 years in West Hartford. And I'm here for you guys. Talk. Shout out to the guys that I met in the study circle. Spent a couple Saturdays together. Had a great time and learned a lot from you guys. I'm glad to see your faces here.
I'm Chris McKee. I'm a sergeant. I think you might have seen me around here in the hallways. I hang out with Officer Morrow, and then before that, we went to Officer TCAS a couple of years back. But I value my relationship with the school community, which means you guys, you know, because it's a big part of our community. And what you think and how you interact with the police and how we interact with you is important, because you're all growing up. You're doing leadership right now. You're growing up into responsible young men and women, and you're going to be members of society. You're going to be able to make changes. You're going to be able to have that voice if you don't already. So I'm looking forward to our questions and our answers. So other than the four-wheeler question, you know, whatever you have, throw at us, because that's what we're here for. We're here to learn from you, hear about what your concerns are, and you know, to try to maybe give some answers if we can.
Josh Amaro, I'm a school resource officer here at Windsor High. I've been a police officer for 7 years in the town of Windsor. Prior to that, I was in the Army for 8 years. And it's my first year here at the high school. I've been here since school started, so I'm having a great time meeting a lot of kids, speaking to a lot of people, learning a lot of backgrounds about everyone. And when we went to Bloomfield with a couple of students here, it it was a good opportunity to see other discussions that can happen, and this stems from that experience, and I'm just excited about this happening now.
So with that, we're gonna open the floor to you guys, because you know what, it's not about us preaching. Any question you guys have, there's nothing off limits. If we can't answer it, we'll let you know, and we'll kind of explain why. But we want to give you our perspective, and we want you to give us your perspective on our interactions, how we can make things better. We obviously know that nationwide, all right, what's going on, all right, and what's the perception that the media is portraying, and what's out there. There's obviously bad cops. I'll be the first one to admit that there's bad cops out there in this country doing bad things. As chief of police, I can tell you that none of my Windsor cops are going to be doing that, or those are the ones that are going to be locked up, going to jail. But not every police department is like that. I can say in Connecticut, we're very fortunate. We're way ahead of the curve compared to a lot of the country, as far as our training, our requirements to get hired. One of the things when we interview people to become police officers, it's the hardest job. It's the hardest thing to do is to get a police officer's job in Connecticut. One of the any other job you take in Connecticut, you don't have to take a polygraph. In Connecticut, you've got to take a polygraph to become a police officer. It's the only job by statute that you have to take a polygraph for in Connecticut.
You guys know what a polygraph is?
No. Lie detector.
Lie detector.
So lie detector. You have to actually get a lie detector before you become a police officer. So you can become governor, you can become president of the United States, you can become a judge, you can become a CEO, all right? All those things, it doesn't matter. You become a police officer, you have to take a lie detector test. And so we ask about racism, about bigotry, what crimes you've committed in the past, because we don't want bad people to become police officers. You have to have a certain moral character to be a cop. Now, it doesn't mean that some don't squeak through. And there's been police officers that have been fired throughout Connecticut for making bad decisions. But we all know when you're hiring someone that's 21, 22 years old, they don't necessarily have a history. 5, 10 years later, who knows what habits they pick up. So, but it's our job, my job as a chief, and as a sergeant, as a supervisor, and as a fellow officer, to police ourselves. So above all, that's one of our things that we need to do to reach out to you. So I'm going to throw it out there for questions. The only thing I do ask is that, as you ask the question, just give us your name. Again, my name is Don, Chris, and Josh. You don't have to call us officer, chief, sergeant. We're regular people, just like you guys. So, with that, I'll throw the floor out for you.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Alright, so I'm Nate, I'm a senior here, and I do a lot of research on stuff like this, and when I look at in the modern era, in terms of incarceration rates between for African American males between the ages of 18 and 25, it's greatly skewed amongst other races. So what are your thoughts on that? How can we change that going forward?
So one of the things that we look at, one is what crimes are being committed and what are people in jail for. Now they say that the jails are full of people that are for drug-related offenses. I have never seen, and I can almost guarantee you, there's no one in any jail in Connecticut that's in jail for smoking weed. It's only a ticket now. It's not even illegal. I mean, it's decriminalized for smoking weed. The ones that are in jail are because they were dealing large amounts, pounds and pounds, and then they also had guns with them. And one of the things that cops are taught are guns and drugs go hand in hand. That if you have drugs, you're going to probably find a gun there somewhere, right? Because we all know what's in the streets, right? How do drug dealers keep their turf? It's with guns, and that's where gun violence comes in. Look at all the shootings in Hartford, and whether it's Hartford and look at Chicago, it's going great. And you know what? The Chicago cop, he should go to jail for a long time. That was messed. Pardon my French, that was messed up, But that's a culture in their police department that I know Windsor doesn't have, and, you know, the towns that I work with, the officers that I know aren't like that. But, you have to look at what's the crime, what are these people going for? And for me, it's not about grouping people, it's about the individual. What do you do? What do you do as an individual? You know, what do you stand for? You know? And to me, that's what you have to look at, is what are the individual characteristics of someone? What are the acts that they did? You know, if I look at someone that's speeding, is the difference if you're going 10 miles an hour over the speed limit or 30 miles over the speed limit? Big difference, right? It's a big difference. You know, that's the difference of someone killing someone or someone maybe causing an accident that's property damage only. You know, so you have to look at each situation differently. So to group things, I think it's tough. I think what we need to do is have more discussions like this. What are the standards? You know, if someone actually is in jail, that means that they were arrested. In order to be arrested, we need to have probable cause. Who knows what probable cause is? You guys heard that word before? Okay, just so you know what probable cause is, for us, it's probable cause is a reasonable person believes that that person committed a crime. Right? That's what probable cause is. So now, it's not just may have done it or likely did it. Probable cause is that based on the evidence that we have, they committed a crime. So that's only the first step, all right? Because then we arrest them, all right, and we send it to the court, and then it's up to the prosecutor, and then you have a jury and a judge that determines what actually happened. On top of that, they could say, you know, what, even though you have probable cause to arrest, yeah, the arrest was good, but there's not enough to make a conviction. And if it doesn't get to a conviction, then it's gone from your record. Right? And, you know, so there's a whole bunch of different steps that lead up to that. So for us, it's probable cause, which is a threshold. You know, it's probably to say, you know, it's like, yeah, they did it, but then to get convicted, it's beyond a reasonable doubt, which isn't beyond any doubt, but it's like beyond any major doubts that are there that, yeah, he did the crime. And then you need a jury, you need people to say, yeah, they did this. So it's hard to say why the numbers are what they are. I don't look at that. I look at the individual. I think if you deal with the individual and the accountability that we each have in society, I think that's going to correct our own problems. Good question.
Speaking of juries, how many 18-year-olds? Any 18-year-olds in there? Just one? You signed up to vote yet? You gonna do that soon? Okay. Because then you can have a say in things, right? You could be picked for a jury. You could be sitting there listening to a criminal case. And you're like, no, yes. So you gotta do that. Not to just pick on you, sorry.
Why are you leaving? I have a test. What is that, Bill? I never invited you. I didn't want to hit the tripod.
And the police officer that did what? Got away with it? Okay. So as the chief said, as Don said, there are some bad cops. Just like there are bad students, just like there are bad teachers. I can tell you that when we see something that happened, and we're not going to judge because, you know, well, actually it did go to court, but when we see something like Chicago, the first ones besides you looking at that going, what the hell is this? Is us. Because we're like, what the heck? Because it, not only is it wrong, but it affects us. Because believe it or not, the way that you may feel, hey, I'm getting picked on by the police, you know what? We all, everyone thinks that, you know, because we got a blue uniform, that we're just like Chicago. That we're just like that officer. And so police brutality is not acceptable. It's not acceptable in any way. And what I think that sometimes people forget is that this shield comes from all of you. The police do what they do because you as the community say, we need police. This is what we want you to do. We want you to police our community, enforce these laws. You want peace and quiet when you go home. You don't want to go home, find your windows smashed, and you know, your stuff gone. So for people in our position that you have given the authority and the power to abuse that, it bothers me personally. And I think I could speak for everybody in the Windsor Police Department. It bothers us. Now, having a conversation saying, you know, police brutality, again, as Chief said, as Don said, I look at individuals, not groups. But I understand why young African American men why young black men feel the way they do. I can't walk in your shoes, but I've had these conversations with your parents and your guardians, like, well, this is why we tell our children, you know, to do this and this, because if you encounter the police, it's gonna go bad. I hear that. It's not okay that you have to feel that way, that any of you have to feel that way, because we are here for you, just like we are here for anyone else. And for any segment of our population to not feel safe and not feel that, you know, during the day you could come to Officer Morrow with something and be like, hey, this is about it. That's not okay. It's not okay. That's what we're here for. So it's disturbing. It's not allowed. It's, you know what, you're not going to find, you will find very few police officers that say, yeah, you know what, it's a good thing that, you know, this guy, you know, got away with it or this or that. People shouldn't get away with it. They should be held accountable. Now, the good thing, if there is a good thing about policing and police brutality, is that we are not only accountable to the law like you are, but we're accountable because we took an oath, not to, you know, to protect and to serve all of you. So, you know, if somebody from an insurance company or somebody who works down the street at the bakery commits a crime, they commit a crime, they get arrested, that's it. If we commit a crime, we not only get arrested, we most likely lose our jobs. We most likely, in the state of Connecticut, lose our right to be a police officer anywhere. So I can't do some crazy stuff here in Windsor and then turn around and go get hired as a Hartford cop, because there's a list, you know, that the governing body maintains. So there are a lot of standards in place to make sure things don't happen. Unfortunately, this world, as you know, is no certain place, and sometimes ugly things happen. Did that answer your question? Okay.
You know, one of the things, when we talk about brutality, and I want to talk about use of force for police, all right? Out on the street, whether it's a car stop, you know, you're on the sidewalk talking to a police officer, if you disagree with a police officer, that's not the time to get into it with, all right? That's what the courts are for. At the end of the day, I can tell you this, all right? It's a fixed game. Who here plays sports, right? A lot of guys, one way or another, right? You have rules, right? To make it even. For policing, it's a fixed game. We're gonna win. I hate to say it, we're gonna win. Because society has put that on us. Where we lose is when it gets to court. So the message I want to say when it comes to use of force is that it's not that we have to use the least amount of force, we have to use force that's reasonable to accomplish our acts. And that's how the courts look at it. And that's why when you look at some of these cases and cops aren't getting convicted, and they're, you know, there's even lawsuits are going through, it's because they look at what the thing. So if someone's fighting with the police can elevate the game. Because at the end of the day, the courts are saying the police have the right to win. So if you ever feel like the cops don't want to, by all means, please don't escalate. You know, there's a place and time, whether it's filing a complaint, getting to court, proving your court, but all things are only going to get worse if people start resisting and fighting.
One good example about that here at the school is our cell phone policy. As soon as you refuse to give up your cell phone, what happens? Security. Because that's not the time for you to what? To argue about it. Because the rule is, once you take the cell phone out, is what? They bag it and they tag it. Now, after the fact, when you see the administrator, you're able to what? Listen, you know, it fell out of my pocket. It's at that level that you're able to have that conversation. And as Don's saying, you know, at that point where I either have to arrest or I have to do something, that's not the point to start fighting with me. If you felt that me, Josh, did something wrong here at the school, I did something aggressive, after everything's settled, you go to my supervisor, Chris, and you say, I just want to let you know that when Josh arrested me or when Josh did this, he did this, he did this, he did this. Then that starts the chain of command because he then advised Don, and that's how that gets settled. Because if you guys start fighting with me, what ends up happening? I have to defend myself. So that's why and it's just the same analogy with the cell phone. You know, that's why they have them. You can't refuse if an administrator asks for the cell phone. There's just an example where you guys can just understand it a little in regards to the level.
So, and then we have two questions.
Yeah.
Can I just jump in on that real quick before you guys go? So if you can remember anything about you know, our conversation years and years from now, it's, there's a statement going around saying comply, then complain. As the chief said, it's a fixed game. Everyone here went through elementary school. You all heard that adage that 2 wrongs don't make a right. So if the police officer is dead wrong, but then you fight that police officer, or you resist, or you do that, we have 2 wrongs not making a right. And as he said, it's a fixed game. So you've already heard your chief of police for your town saying what he's not going to tolerate. So anytime that something goes wrong or goes bad, even if you're mad and you're steaming and you don't, this is an injustice, this is wrong, do what you're supposed to do, listen, comply, and then the next day you could be standing waiting for him to come in. You could be writing letters, and you know, all of you that we've been in classes before, you hear us. You could write a letter to whoever you want, the president, whatever. Well, I mean, obviously start with him, start with me, you know, if it's about Officer Morrow, about an officer out in the street, but you won't win that dynamic, and it won't help your case. So if you comply, deal with what you got to deal with, you don't have to walk away happy. You can be unsatisfied as anything, but just like when you're unsatisfied at a restaurant, what do you do? If you don't like the service of the food, what do you do?
You don't tip them.
Well, you don't tip them, that's a good point. What else do you do? You complain to the manager maybe, try to get another meal, or tell them that was bad, something like that. Afterwards, because then you'll be found to be right. But if you're doing it on the side of the road, and it doesn't look good. It's 2 wrongs make a right. So I'm sorry, I know you had a question, someone else over here had a question.
You saying like in the moment, like we don't have the right to like voice our opinion outside of the story. We have to like wait, because the process is like we go to court, that could take like a year to like a long time.
That's an excellent question, but you can tell me your name.
Isaiah.
Isaiah, thank you. No, I'm not saying you can't voice your opinion. There's a way to voice your opinion. Officer, do you have probable cause? You heard that term. Do you have probable cause to arrest me? Officer Morrow, do you have probable cause to be going through my backpack right now? And, you know, officer, do I have to answer that question? Voice your opinion. I don't like this. I disagree with you. Well, I'm telling you this, so now I'm the cop. I'm telling you, Isaiah, turn around, put your hands behind your back. You're under arrest. When you hear those words, or, you know, then, okay, I disagree with you, but I'm going to do it. So voice your opinion, but if you can do it in a way that's not going to escalate. If you're yelling at me and this and that, now the cop's starting to get nervous, give me more backup, that just makes for a bad scene, right? But I'm not saying you don't have a voice, but voice your opinion right there, comply, go with it. You don't need to wait till the court thing is done. Oh, the court that's over here. Like you said, that could take a year or so, Isaiah. The next day, you could be in talking with the chief. You could be talking, you could be telling Mr. Sills if it's something here in school or whoever, hey, Amaro did something that was crazy wrong, I want to speak to his boss. You can go home and tell your family if you want to have them involved in it. But the minute you get home, the minute you get out of the police lockup, if God forbid that happens, you could be voicing your concerns. What I'm saying is, you're all intelligent individuals, young people. Don't voice your concerns to escalate it. I want to search your bag. You can say, do you have probable cause to search my bag? I can say, get out of the way, Isaiah, move it. And I can start searching. You just keep that in your mind. And then when you make the complaint, when you're seeing him the next day, I asked if the officer had probable cause. He wouldn't answer me. He told me, get out of the way. So does that make sense? Say something if you like, but don't escalate it. Some people get mad. We've all seen these videos and stuff on, you know, people yelling and screaming and getting out of the car and coming at the cop. That's not going to end good. We don't want to be in that position, and you guys don't want to be in that position, because that doesn't end well for anybody.
I was wondering, like, kind of. Oh, my name's Nate. I think I said that. But like, what is the difference between? Because I keep hearing y'all say reasonable, and what's like the difference between reasonable and excessive? Because I feel like there's like a fine line, and every time there's a problem, it's because like the word kind of gets jumbled, because the victim feels as if it's excessive force, and the cop feels as if it's reasonable and necessary force. And I feel like that has to be defined like at the highest judicial level before we can really come to an agreement between victims and police officers.
Well, as a police officer, reasonable force is the force that I use. Basically, I meet force with force. So if it's hands-on, it's hands-on. You know, it's enough force that I need to use in order to make you comply. So if I'm arresting you, you don't want to be arrested, and you're, you know, wailing your arms around and resistant, then what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to reasonably, you know, take your arms and get you under control. Excessive force what I think would excessive force be, and just to give you an example, is same example, you know, And he's like, no, you're not gonna arrest me, you're gonna, you know, we're gonna fight, you know, and you grab something, you grab a weapon. By a weapon, I mean a chair, you know, your Chromebook, which breaks easily, something. Now you've what? You've escalated the level a little. So now I mean, you guys see all the stuff that we carry, you know, they're not comfortable. There's tools that I have, so I even take my stick out, I'm like, well, he has a chair, I'm not gonna grab a chair. So you meet force with force. You meet, you know, your force, you meet it with my force, and again, I understand what you're saying in regards to, you know, what the victim sees as, oh, well, he used excessive force as opposed to reasonable. That's why we have the court that decides that and says, well, no, the officer, you used excessive force, excuse me. And that's where we get in trouble. Because, again, our actions are judged by you guys, by people that are in the court, by juries.
It's a good question. If I could just add on to that, though, Nate. There are decisions that are made. If you look up like Graham versus Connor, but let me throw this out there because I know we got some intelligent individuals. Highest court in the land is who? Which court? Supreme Court. Outstanding. So Graham versus Connor. That's a case that talks about police use of force and what's reasonable. And if you read that, if you go on, you know, you Google that, you check that out, it'll talk about things like what was the crime, what was the amount of force used. You know, like Officer Morrow said, right now we're trying to arrest you and you're just flailing around. You know, we can't come in here with an armored car and run you over, right? I mean, it's got to be, you know, but at the same time, you know, what was the crime that was committed? You know, I mean, you steal a Skittles bar from CVS and you're running down the street. You know, the officer shouldn't be out there hitting you in the back with a taser, right? So, I mean, I don't want to give you examples because everything changes everything, but there is case law. There is that definition, so that's a great question, but there are those definitions.
Sorry, Keith. If you take into consideration the whole circumstance, the size, skill of both the perpetrator and the police officer will play into what is reasonable. It might be reasonable for a smaller officer to use more force to effect arrest than a larger, more skilled officer. I'll use an example because it received a lot of publicity. Officer Slam, which was his nickname, who slammed the girl, you've seen the video. His police chief said that was excessive force. He could have effected that arrest given his size, skill, and the person he was with, plus the crime she was committing, which was disobeying his order to leave, by simply using some type of come along or paying compliance hold. Instead, he chose to slam, which under those circumstances, because she was what we call passively resisting. She didn't escalate the level, and by him slamming her, his chief, rightly so I believe, said his force was excessive and fired him. He could have taken her down much easier and using a whole host of other type of takedowns to effect that arrest, and that's where you can see a visual picture of excessive force. He could have effected that arrest given his size, skill, the complaint, her size, to make that arrest, and he went way above board. You know what I'm saying? That was a clear picture of excessive, where he could have probably effected that arrest, used a lot less force on her. Not probably, I'm sure he could have. If he had any type of thumb lock, gooseneck, wrist, anything, would have allowed him to take control of her.
And then you could flip the script as an officer. If I'm an officer and I have to effect an arrest on Captain
Calling
Kears,
them.
you know, how many of you guys know Captain Kears? Are you guys gonna go alone and take Captain Kears down? No. Exactly. So, you know, now you have to use reasonable force, you know, whatever force that may be, whether SWAT team or something, to take Captain Kears down. You know, Captain Kears is just Captain Kears. That, you know, he doesn't feel pain, so you know that. We all know that here at the high school. So those are examples of, you know, what reasonable force is and how you can grade them.
I heard we have a right, you know, try to sit in the car, shoot, pull out the car. Also, I forgot who it was, but he was didn't really choke him. I guess he already had worked out. Couldn't breathe. So how can that was
So, one, it's funny because what you're saying about, you do have a right to refuse someone to search your cars. You can say no, but at the end of the day, the officer has come up to probable cause to believe there's evidence in there. So, let's say you're smoking weed, all right, the cop pulls you over. He smells that weed coming from your car. That's probable cause, now the officer has a right to search your car. You can say no, he's still gonna do it. Because now he has probable cause to search your car, and it's legal. The courts have said, the Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court, said the officer can do that. On top of that, the U.S. Supreme Court also said that if I pull you over for running a red light, and I want you to step out of the car, I can order you out of the car. You can't say no to that. The U.S. Supreme Court said that the officer, based on his training and experience, if he orders you out of the car, you can't say no. It could be to come to the back of the car to give you a ticket. It could be just because of where the car is parked. Whatever reason, the officer has the right to order you out of the car. So it's important to know what the laws are. That's why education is really important. The Aaron Garner case, that's New York, where the officers came behind, and Aaron Garner was a big boy. You think Captain Pierce is big? Aaron Garner was what, 350 almost, probably 6'5". That's a big boy, you know. And so when the officer put him in a chokehold and brought him down to the ground, Aaron Garner was fighting. All right. Now, he was saying he couldn't breathe. Anytime you can talk, you're breathing. Because how you talk is the air is moving past your vocal cords. That's what a lot of people talk. The problem with Aaron Garner, he was so big that he couldn't breathe because he was so heavy. And when the position they got him down on the ground, when they got him onto his belly, he couldn't breathe because his lungs couldn't expand. All right, so he couldn't get the air. So the officer should have recognized that and should have gotten him up on the ground to sit up so that he could actually breathe and his lungs could expand. So that's why that whole case is, there's so many different small parts you got to look at. Instead of looking at just what the media said, look at the whole picture. You know, because while he was choking, the officer took his arm off once they got control of his arms, and he's still saying, "I can't breathe." It had nothing to do with the chokehold. Although you think the media is like, they choked him. He died because he couldn't breathe because his lungs were compressed. That was because he was laying on the ground. Maybe an officer had a knee on him or whatever, but the officers have to realize that. And that's what it is. So it's again, look deeper than what the media says, because the media is a flash in the pan. They're looking for ratings. They're looking to sell the story. That's how they make money. These 24 hours, they're on the 24/7. They have to fill their time.
Police.
Look,
Chief, if you watch that, really, and people don't like to hear this, he probably never was choking Garner. When he jumped on him, they used the bull ride him down to the ground. When he falls, as he said, he's speaking. When he's saying, "I can't breathe," as the chief said, he's really, but he couldn't articulate it. "I'm having trouble breathing." What that's called is positional asphyxiation, and it is way high on the list of in custody police deaths. They send out, the Police Chiefs Association send out, they make sure you don't have people in the back laying down. There was a sergeant there, she should have recognized, if they sat Garner up, it's hard to say hindsight. I think that guy is fine and we're not even having this conversation about him. They rolled him down, he's on the ground, they just left him on his stomach. That positional asphyxiation, which is what that was, is unfortunately not uncommon form of in-custody police death. And it is more because of the position and size of the person than anything else. And when he's saying he's having trouble breathing, it's because of the pressure of himself lying. Any of you who've seen exercise, when I make you run and then you lay on your stomach and you have trouble breathing, it's that same feeling, but you can't correct it. He couldn't correct that, and no one recognized that, and they didn't send him up, which is why they paid out in the lawsuit. But it's the same reason why the officer got off for not choking him, because he did not choke him to death. It wasn't even close to being that. did not choke him to death. It wasn't happening. He was speaking very clearly. And if someone puts you in a chokehold, you can't speak that clearly. Now, where I think we have faltered training, because there are a gazillion more takedowns again, similar to the situation with the guy slamming a rear century takedown. That doesn't even happen. And he was more set up for that, and his size wouldn't have mattered. But that's a matter of training that they would have to get, and it would have allowed for a much more effective, quick, and efficient takedown, and that probably would not have occurred. But you know, those sort of things happen.
Well, I think what it comes down to, so Shai, for everybody, is we have to talk. We have to communicate. Because just like you thought, hey, I don't have to get out of the car when a police officer wants to search it, Don just made it clear to you that you do, based on Supreme Court case law, right? But we got to have these conversations, and we got to be able to trust each other and talk to each other. And we all have to realize that the media also wants to make money, right? That's their job, is to sell stories. Just remember last year when over at Sage Park, there was all sorts of F Windsor and all this kind of graffiti spray painted over there. Anybody remember that? No. So the media made that out to be this big thing, right? Bloomfield and Windsor High hate each other. Now I know there's a rivalry, but they're at odds. It's like there's gangs involved. Was that the case? No. It's we whoop Windsor or we whoop Bloomfield all the time, and they get mad or whatever. And so some 2 or 3 individuals came over here and spray painted. Initially, if you go back and look at some of that media, you'll see that they thought there was gangs between Windsor and Bloomfield, and there's going to be this big war. No, it was 2 or 3 knuckleheads that came over here one night and spray painted the bleachers over there. So we have to realize that the media wants to tell a story. Doesn't mean they're wrong. Doesn't mean they're completely wrong. But they want to sell stuff. So when we have questions, we got to talk. Hey, how come this happened? And sometimes the police don't explain that. Sometimes we might be so busy that I got shot on the side of the road, I'm searching his car, that Isaiah sees it, and then we drive off, and he's like, wow, that's messed up what they did. And maybe if I took the time to say, hey, Isaiah, here's the deal. I don't want to get into his business, but this, and this happened. If we did that and communicated, or if you said, hey, can I ask you a question? That happened to me early on in my career. Now, you guys are all pretty too young to remember what happened down at LP years and years ago, right? With the stabbing. You may have heard the story or no? Yes. You heard the story? All right, so two young men wanted to fight. If you fight, you don't obviously want to do it at the school. They went down to LP Wilson, and the bigger of the two was getting beaten by the littler of the two. So someone threw a knife in there. Little guy used the knife. Big guy used the knife because he didn't want to look like he's getting punked out. Now we had a dead young man, another young man that went to jail. This is years before your time. However, I remember that night coming on, and I worked midnights. I remember a young man coming up to me in the center, and I won't tell you that I was by the donut shop because I don't want to give you any stereotypes here, but I won't tell you I was standing outside the donut shop, and a young man came up to me, who was actually now a police officer, and said, hey, officer, I didn't know this guy from anything. Hey, I heard about this young man getting stabbed. What's the deal with that? These are the kind of conversations we have to have, so that we can communicate. Because the media is not always given the right story, and if we don't go and find out the information ourselves somehow, we're going to walk around with animosity or anger or that kind of stuff on both sides of the house. And we don't want to do that. No cop should be thinking, oh, every kid's up. What do police, or in your minds, what do police think about kids? We see 2 kids standing on a corner. What do we think? They up to something, right? And that's what we, from the chief on down, train our officers. No, because 2 young men are standing in front of a store doesn't mean they're out there selling weed or they're about to break in. They're 2 young men hanging out, just like we used to hang out. But, we need to train our officers, just like all of you. When you see the police car coming, we hope that we can get the idea going, oh, they're not just here to what? To mess with us, right? That when they're not, and that's the communication that we need to have. All of us, not just this room, all of us.
Chief, I just want to correct Chris's story, because I heard it too, and he was actually inside the donut shop.
That's so wrong. I think I was coming to look for you. You were waiting, and you knew what time they were coming out.
Now, that might be my
But I'll get right to you in a second. But it brings up a thing upstairs. Isn't that what really racism kind of involves? Upstairs, don't put people in groups, right? cops get stereotyped, right? You guys have, what do you guys think of cops? Right? Probably all think pretty much the same thing, right? Might not be true, we're all different, we're all individuals. Just like you guys are all. Just as wrong, as much as it's wrong for me to group all you guys together, you can't do the same thing with cops. You know, if you're not doing something wrong, and we had talked about this, we spent 2 Saturdays together, we talked about it. You can't be afraid to go up and talk to someone. If you see a cop there and he's doing, he's in his car, you're not, well, hey, officer, how you doing? You know, introduce yourself. You know, you're not doing anything wrong. Start a conversation. Because guess what? If you get to know each other one-on-one, we're all the same. We're really all the same. We all want the same thing. We all want to be successful. We all want to be healthy. We all want to be happy. We all want to make good money. Right? We want to make a positive difference in people's lives. We're really all the same.
My name's Alex. I myself have never had like a negative interaction with the police, but I know a lot of kids my age and particularly my skin color have. So like, how do you think we can work to improve the relationship between cops and people in my demographic?
One of the things that I heard that has now been something that I started repeating is one of the ways that you can actually pick, because you admitted, Alex, that you've never had a negative interaction with a police officer, but a lot of friends that are your skin color have. So one of the ways that I believe that you can do that is start telling your friends about the fact that, well, I've never had a bad experience with a police officer, and if anyone here has had good ones, why isn't it that spreads, as opposed to, this cop, he's a mean cop, or, every time Chris comes around, he takes my donuts from me, he doesn't even ask, it's, we don't, sorry, I'm sorry. we don't, that's one of the things that you have is the power of voice, You had a bad experience with a police officer, or I didn't, oh really, tell me about it. And I think that's one of the ways that we can definitely, not just have the conversation, but actually, have the conversation influence others with the relationship between police officers.
Can I jump in on that for a second? So, without putting anyone's business out there, someone came to Officer Morrow, and I know this story. No, I'm not, okay. Someone in this school came to Officer Morrow because their relative had a bad experience with another police department. And he heard the story, he's like, that's crazy. He told that person exactly what to do. Here's what you do, you call, you get a boss, you make a complaint, and that situation resolved itself. And I still see that person coming up to Officer Morrow, that was a few weeks ago. I still see that person coming up to Officer Morrow, that other police officer, not anyone here, not anyone in Windsor even, they got in trouble, they did the wrong thing. They treated someone the way that we wouldn't want to be treated, So someone spoke up, made him aware of something. He told him, here's the steps, just like we just told all of you guys, and then those worked, and that person now has satisfaction, and that person, and they're happy with the way that this ended. And that cop had to admit to her that he was wrong. And we got to have that trust. If you say, what can we do? We got to start with some trust. We got to start with some talk, some trust, some reaching out to each other, and building on it from there,
The chief started by saying stereotyping is a huge problem and bias. For years, I taught cultural diversity to police officers. Back when it was first mandated, the very first class that was taught at the State Police Academy, I taught that class. And one of the things that I used to say is we have to be very careful not to stereotype one another, because often we prejudge and make a decision based on a perception that might not have anything to do with our personal interactions. How each of us handle those personal interactions, because the only person you have control of is yourself. Don't buy into what you see on television, good or bad. Really deal with your own personal interactions. If you just take this school, for instance, there's 1,100 kids here. Y'all see a police officer, all of y'all, I know everyone in here. Y'all interact with me, some of you almost daily. Unless I'm making you do push-ups for something you did, you don't have a negative interaction. I know you don't. So, but you wouldn't say, hey, that's a police You don't talk about that. You don't talk about when an officer gives you $1 for lunch. I see that over and over again. Sometimes I wonder how Sergeant McKee even has any money left after he leaves here at lunchtime. So, but they don't. That person don't go home and say, "Hey, Mom, Sergeant McKee gave me $1 for lunch." But if they saw an officer on television slamming someone, oh, look what the police did. Instead of saying that's what that guy did. When the police officers do things good, unfortunately, and it's that way with stereotypes. When a particular group or someone from a group does something bad, that receives 10 times the press of when someone does something good. And those things start to mold our perception of that group of people. And it becomes powerful, it's pervasive. Understand, please, that there are some bad police officers out there. Unfortunately, I've arrested them as a police officer and helped fire them, and they're gone. What I'm telling you, though, is there are 10 times that many good police officers who don't get recognized for that. Doesn't carry the recognition. I'm just going to share with you very quickly a story about when you talk about perception. Growing up in Philadelphia and Hartford, I did not like the police. And I'm going to tell you about one interaction. And I used to tell this in my class. I'm coming from wrestling practice one day with about 5 guys wearing my Weaver. Yep, I went to Weaver. Jacket with letters on the back. And a police officer came up to me and said, "Come here, I want to talk to you for a minute." He stopped his car, went over, "What's up? We just had a robbery down the street. Where you coming from?" So I'm like, wow, somebody did a robbery wearing a Weaver jacket, looking like me. So I didn't say that to him. He was like, "I just gotta make sure you're not the suspect." I was like, "Well, what the suspect look like?" He's like, "I asked the questions. You just stand here and be quiet." And I was like, "What the heck?" So me being me, I wasn't that much. I started laughing. He said, "You think something funny? You want to go downtown?" And he got out. He was like this big. Really, I ain't trying to be funny. I was a wrestling champion. Thought to myself, I could take this dude down and be gone. He won't even know who did it. But I didn't. I was compliant because that's how I was brought up. And the dude got all in my face and was like, "Do you know who I am?" And I was like, "Oh, no." And I was looking at his name. So he was like, "Oh, officer," and he said, "Let me tell you something. I'm out here trying to catch a robbery suspect. If I tell you to stand here, you stand here." So I'm like, "Okay, I'm standing there." But the guy looked like me. So my friends will come around. He said, "Oh, y'all go stand across the street." They were compliant. They went and stood across the street. He was telling me, he spent about the next 5 minutes telling me that I thought I was tough. He could see all this. "I don't care about you, the captain of this team and that team." I had all the pins. Y'all got them jackets. Really putting me down. So finally, on the radio, you can hear this because his windows are male. 6 feet to 6'2", dark complexion. Now, I didn't used to be dark and tall when I was little, when I was young. I was like shorter than I am now even, same complexion. I did have an afro, if y'all can believe that. And they said wearing a black leather coat. So again, I started laughing. I was like, "That don't sound nothing like me." He said, "Shut up. You say," so I'm like, this dude, instead of going to really go catch the suspect who I look nothing like, and he was standing there, and so the guy said, "I think I got the suspect." We were on the corner of Tower Avenue and Blue Hills Avenue. And it was one of the side streets of Blue Hills Avenue. So the guy's like, "You lucky I gotta go, or I will be taking you to jail." And I'm like, for what? And he's like, you lucky. And he jumped in the car and sped off. Now, I go home like any tough guy. I tell my mother. Hey, the police, like, it was just, so, you know what my mother said? "What color was he?" And what do you think I told her? That dude was blacker than anybody in here. So I tell that story because of this. If he was white, what would have been the assumption?
Racist.
He was racist. No, he was just a jerk. And I'm telling you, jerks come in all shapes, sizes, and colors. Deal with that particular behavior rather than making an assumption. Because the assumption in the class, everybody always said, "Oh, that dude had to be white." No, that dude was dark-skinned black male. Like this big. And at the time, and I know him, I ain't gonna put his name out there because he was one of the first black police officers on Hartford's force. You've been around long enough, you can figure out who he was. But what I'm telling you, I talked to him after I became a police officer. Really, he ain't like the way the conversation went. But what I'm telling you is, that type of stuff, you assume that is a person that it was racist because he was not. I was like, this dude's just a jerk. And oftentimes it's just that person is just a jerk. Color might not have anything to do with it. It is an assumption. Don't just jump to that. Deal with that behavior. That guy was a jerk. That didn't make all the rest of the guys there jerks. It just made him one.
All right, guys, let's, we have time for, we can get through the last questions, but let's make that the last one. I see Manson, Eric, Cruz. Cruz, I know you had your hand up for a while. Huh? Chad, you too? Okay, let's get to these last 5. Go ahead, Cruz.
So, I want to know, like, how can you make it better? You know, like, if a cop does something, what's the way to make it so that, you know, it's not just saying, oh, that cop did that, that's crazy. Like, make it more efficient, a way to get the cop arrested if he did something bad. Or make it a more efficient way to say that cop actually did something bad.
So, again, you have a cell phone, video camera, right? Instead of interjecting yourself, video camera.
They make you put it away.
What's that?
The cop is like,
They can't make you put it away. They cannot, it's against the law.
I've had
And if they,
recently, they make you put it away.
recently?
Yeah.
Wow, and if that's.
Where
the
at?
case- Where at? In Hartford?
That's illegal.
When you get to the bigger cities, it's a different animal. Captain Curious will tell you, all the other officers will tell you, and it's a different animal. But by law, the officer can get arrested for telling you to put the camera. And he'll lose his job. There's a law against that. I would keep it on. If you have him recorded telling you to put it away, then listen to him, all right? What did I say? What's the first rule, right? You're not going to win, right? Listen to him, but guess what? What did you just record? Him telling you to put it away. Then you get that, and you call up, and you call the chief, and you say, I want to speak to the chief of police.
You got the video?
You got the video. You got it. Exactly. Put it away. You already have the evidence.
You got it?
It got it.
You guys videotape everything else.
I came in and heard that the chief gave you guys really the formula. It's so simple to have good interactions with police. Comply. If you have a problem, complain after. I'm sure told you, you can't even resist an illegal arrest. But please, despite what you see on television, the police are not the problem with what's going on here in our society. There may be a few problem officers. I'll use Chicago as an example because that guy did something that looked crazy. But he was arrested for that. He was already arrested. I don't know, like they could super arrest him. I don't know what else they could do. But Chicago, Jeepers Creepers, a few weeks before that, a 9-year-old was lured into an alley by gang members and executed. No one, it should have been, they should have shut that gang down. Those same rallies that was in front of City Hall in Chicago should have been in front of that gang headquarters because everybody know where they are, shutting them down. But that's not happening. Chicago has led the country the last 3 years in murders, surpassing Philadelphia, which used to be on a crazy roll with over 500 murders. When you have 600 people getting murdered in 1 year, and everyone's marching about one guy, and I'm not downplaying that what happened, that was heinous. That murder, which the guy was arrested for, and by the way, the people who were responsible for killing that 9-year-old boy have not been caught, and no one is coming forward. And even the father is keeping it real and not talking to the police. That's 1,000 times worse. And I'm going to say that. See, people are afraid to say it. Hey, I'm not a police officer no more. And I'm telling you, what's worse in Chicago, everybody should be marching. We got like 300 other murderers besides that. That guy got caught. Let's catch some of the other murderers. But because people are not compliant and not talking to the police, it's allowing for an environment where you have situations where even the police officer doesn't feel safe. And I'm not saying trust him, what he did was wrong. But all of that goes into how that officer is going to respond. It factors in there. When you had shooting after shooting after shooting, because if someone will ambush and kill a 9-year-old boy, man, they won't think anything about killing anybody in this room. That's unheard of. I've been in this business for over 26 years. You ever heard of anything like that before?
Yeah.
That was frightening to me. Because that changed the rules of the game. And that's the type of city those police officers are policing. So as bad as that was and hard as that was, man, that literally is a war zone. That's crazy to me, that someone could do that and the city not rise up and go, like I said, to that gang headquarters and shut them down. Y'all not selling on this corner no more. This is crazy. Y'all out of control. We tell it. Trust me, there's 100 people who know who did that shooting. Because there were multiple suspects. They did it in broad daylight. The boy was on his way home from school. But nobody's been caught. That's a bigger problem. And we have to not buy into that the police are the problem. Because it's not.
There were three other questions?
I think it's Simmons. Oh, Manson. Chad.
Eric, I'm
Eric.
You can answer them whichever order you like, but how many black police officers are currently employed in the Windsor Police Department? Do you believe that the police force should reflect what the community looks like?
Absolutely. I believe, one, Captain Kearse left. I came in August, all right? The last 4 retirements were African Americans, right?
Yep.
So, and the next one that's retiring is going to be African.
Exactly. We've had a lot of changeover.
Yeah.
Percentage-wise, at one point it was about 27%, which matches almost exactly, in Windsor, 27% of the population is black or African American. So we were pretty much right on point. Right now, the department's a little low, but for Hispanic officers, percentage-wise, we only have about 7% in this town that are Hispanic, but our police department has more than that.
Yeah, Eric, before Captain Kearse and all that left, we put down, and so we have 20% of our police department are black officers. If you look at nationwide for a community our size, only 5% of departments are black officers. So we have more black officers, we have more Hispanic officers because we have 14% of our staff are Hispanic, whereas in the population, again, 5.1, and we have more female officers. So nationwide, it's 8.2 for a community our size, and we have 22% of our police officers are women. So all 3 categories, we strive to represent the community.
It's a diverse police department, particularly when you compare it to others, and they're continuing. I actually had a call from Amelia, you don't know who that is, from the Human Resource Director, asking, because she knows I go to HBCUs a lot, if I would be willing to bring some stuff to them. Of course I would. And so they're trying to recruit at historical black colleges and universities, looking for officers to sustain and build upon what they've had in the past. And so I think the chief here recognizes the importance of that. He and I have had conversations because he knows I'm retired. When we go out to lunch again, he's treating again. So
you have to pick the restaurant.
there you go. And I'm helping him figure out which restaurants to go to, and he knows I'm poor, so he's feeding. So as we talk about it, I know for a fact that he wants that diversity that you're speaking.
Question for you. How many here have thought about being a police officer? Guys, it's a great
More.
It's a great career. You can really make a difference. You get to help people, you know. Obviously, remember what I talked about. It's one of the hardest jobs to get. When I was in West Hartford, out of 10 people applying, only one's going to get good enough to get hired. That's how strict it is. You know, so you gotta, you know, and it's not that you can't make mistakes. You know, we were all kids. We all made mistakes, you know. But it's, do you mature to a level that society's going to trust you? You know, is the chief going to trust you? Because at the end of the day, if they do something wrong, guess who's getting in trouble? They're going to get in trouble, but I'm going to be the one that's going to get in the most trouble because I let it happen. So, you know, think about that when you're going to school.
Think about that when you're going to college. You got to be 21. But we can get you all the information. Think about it. How do you change something? You change it from the outside or the inside? The inside. So think about that. You know, everyone's got real good opinions and thoughts in here. So if you don't like what you see, or you say, I never want to be like that, or I don't want that to ever happen. We have plenty of police officers in Windsor who had bad experiences outside of Windsor. Said, I don't want that to happen again. And they became police officers. So think about it.
You got another question?
Yeah, I know you can't put a price on change, but how is the pay?
How's the what?
How's the pay?
The pay? Oh, so our starting salary as a brand new police officer, we're going to send you away the first year you're in training. You start off at $65,000 a year. all right? And then you get, that includes holiday pay, you get holidays off, you get to work overtime. There are officers that are making, and then at the top step, if you were to work no overtime, it's about 85 to 87,000. All right, we have officers making 120, 130, all right, and once they get 10, 15 years on, 4 weeks vacation, all right. So you can make some good money.
Pension, health insurance. Think about it.
Good money.
And the key is when you go to retire, you end up making,
Look how young he is. He's retired.
you make, for the rest of your life, you get your retirement pay, plus you get cost of living increases. You get a raise, literally, from 3 to 7% every year for the rest of your life. And the retirement pay, without saying exactly, is much higher than the median income for the country, what you make in retirement.
You making the chief buy you dinner.
Yeah, explain that.
He retired too. And he's
We have 2 more questions, because I know we gotta get Chad.
Chad left.
All right, we got 2 more questions. You got over here?
No, yes.
Yeah, he's gone.
I say, yeah, why am I looking at
Back like to the story, like you said with the black cops. I heard like a lot of black cops are like worse than white cops sometimes, because they be like insecure about their jobs and they feel like they gotta prove something to somebody.
I don't know that that's the case. I know that individually, treat them just like you want to be treated as an individual. That hasn't been my personal experience, even though that experience with that guy. One thing that I did do, I didn't allow that to take me, because back then I used to box for Powell. There was a sergeant named Thornton at the time who helped and who was good, and it's the individual. It is the individual. Like I said, as in any profession, you know, for most, you guys familiar, 5 or 10% perform at the highest level, 5 or 10% at the bottom, but most of us are going to be right in the middle. And that's, policing is just like that. Most of them going to be okay, coming, doing the best they can at their job. And the problem is, because police have so much power, authority, and visibility, anytime someone steps outside the lines of normalcy and reasonableness, it is amplified 1,000 times over. It carries so much weight and it does so much harm to that particular police department and policing as a whole. I mean, we don't live anywhere near Ferguson, but we felt when he was still in West Hartford at the time, they felt it there, we felt it. Come on, we had trainings beyond Ferguson. I'm like, we already beyond Ferguson, we like 2,000 miles away. But we had to, because that was impacted. You didn't have nothing like that in West Hartford when he was there, we didn't have that here. But we had to deal with that because it was so powerful and it was so pervasive in terms of how that impacted society. And that was one Officer Smith in one community that you could see right off the bat there were problems there. Because no one knew anyone on either side of the fence.
One last question, right?
That's good. One, we don't even track stats like that, because we don't even look at it.
What did
The
he
question
say?
was for every white person in Weston, how many black people are there? Because, now think about, who are police arresting? All right, so we get called to Target, all right? Target's the latest one, all right? We get called to Target. Probably almost every day we're going to call to Target to shop. Someone's stealing stuff. We don't say who's stealing stuff or not. Just go and, all right, who stole it? Where's the video? Where's your evidence? You know? We stop the person, they have the stuff. It's all about the individual life. And that's what we have to get away from numbers. We have to look at the individual. We got to get down to the one number that matters. One. You. Individual. Right? What do you do? What do you like?
Like, I don't know, you can't,
Now,
like, the numbers don't matter.
I'll say the members do matter. I'm gonna tell you, in our criminal justice system, it matters. And I'm gonna tell you, just statistically, there's over 300 million Americans, about which 30 million are black Americans. Arrests, if you just look at all the arrests, the FBI, you can go to FBIstats.com and look at stats.com and look this up. We arrest more whites than we do blacks. But in our prisons, when we talk about conviction rates and people doing time, that's where you start to see the huge disparity, with more blacks being convicted and getting more time for similar crimes even. And that's unfortunate. We as police don't impact that. But if you were to look at Windsor's arrest numbers, you see that percentage-wise, like for motor vehicle stops, we stop percentage-wise anyway, more whites, and you will see that. But when we talk about convictions and other things, sometimes those numbers change and are not in line with the demographic makeup of a particular community. And those are things that has to be addressed and figure out why that's happening. You know, and there's so many, you don't have enough time in this class, there's so many other factors that go into that, that just say, this is, you stopped 15 or arrested 15 blacks and 25 whites, like, well, how did that happen? You gotta look at the incidents, where they were, and all of those sort of things, and
And I think
it's a lot.
He brings up a good point, that we don't, once we arrest someone and it goes to court, we're done. We don't have anything to do with it. It's the prosecutor, it's the judges, and it's the jury. Right? That's not us. You know? And again, I think the numbers to show, because they do run numbers, that our arrests are based pretty close to what our population is.
Yeah.
You know? And along Connecticut, it's the same thing. Conviction rates are completely different, because that's the courts. That's not us. That's the prosecutor, that's the judge.
Chief, before you came, we had looked at some things, for instance, with marijuana arrests. We were arresting, percentage-wise, more blacks. But for our driving while intoxicated, we were arresting percentage-wise way more whites. Now, were we trying to arrest more blacks for marijuana and more whites for just behavior? I believe was determining how we were making those arrests, and that's just what was happening. Remember, we look at those numbers. It was the disparity was crazy in terms of the number of whites we were arresting for DUI and the number of blacks we were arresting, which looked like this, and then the marijuana, it looked like that.
I think to end it, because I know Mr. Ward put his passes out. You know, this was a question that was asked to me, and I'm gonna open it up and just ask you guys a question. You know, as Don is saying, Chris, Calvin, you got to look at the whole picture. You know, and you know, you're given that information. You're looking into it. You're studying it. You know, they posed this question to me, and I'm gonna pose it to you guys, and we'll end it with this. You know, you guys are all police officers. You guys go to a bank robbery, and they tell you if there's a white man and a black man that robbed the bank, and you get there and they both start running. Who are you catching? Now, media and society tells you what? Well, they're gonna get the black people. So the question is, and they pose this question to me: who are you gonna go? Who are you gonna catch? Who are you gonna go after?
The slow one.
Who said that? Who said it? The slowest one. That's it. You're gonna catch who you can catch. You know, so they posed that question to me, and you know, the big thought process is, well, you know, we're gonna get the black one. That's exactly what they told me. I said, and I had that situation. It wasn't a bank robbery; it was a stolen vehicle. I caught the slowest person.
But I'm telling you guys this just by the fact that you're being here, that Mr. Moore set this up for you. Not only does it help you, it help your school, help our police department, it helps the community at large, because you go home, share what you talked about at home with your parents, who will talk about it with their friends, and your siblings will talk about it, and that spreads. One of the things, there was a Justice Department report, and you can find it online on Ferguson, and it talks about all the things they didn't do before the shooting, because that police department was failing before that. And one of the things they never did was communicate and interact on positive matters with the community. Having a police chief come, trust me when I tell you, it's not normal. For the chief we had before, he would have come also. I'll just say that. But having Chief Melanson here, that's not every time. Trust me when I tell you that's not going to happen, doesn't happen. He's in his second or third in command, and say, tell me about it when you get back. That goes a long way, because it starts at the top. And if the chief wants to communicate and interact with the community, with you guys, trust me, anybody who's under that ladder, they want to move up, they see, hey, that's what I need to do. Because you lead by example. Einstein said, leadership by example is the only way to lead. So by him being here, he's setting the tone for all of the other police officers in Windsor. They see that. Where's the chief? Oh, the chief over at the school talking to the kids. So maybe what I should be doing when I'm driving is getting out and talking to some kids. And that's where it starts. That's where it comes from. And you have to be open-minded enough to accept that.
I mean, I speak for the chief and Sergeant Key. I mean, we appreciate you guys for this opportunity, letting us take some of your, I know you guys want to be in class studying right now. So we want to thank you guys for giving us your time this morning. If you guys have any other questions, I know, it wasn't enough time. You guys know where my office is. If you want to get in contact with Sergeant McKee or the chief, I have their contact information, the emails, I can give it to you. That way you guys,
Chief's at 340 Bloomfield Avenue, Sergeant McKee's at any of the 3 Dunkin' Donuts.
Thank you, Mr. Moore.
Guys, we appreciate your time. Let's hustle the class.
Thanks for your time, gentlemen.
All right, thanks, guys.
Open this out before, right?